Hey everyone, it's Jeff. I figure I might as well start off this whole thing with a video where I make funny voices for the entire world to see and see where that gets me. So we're going to be talking about how I like to do voices for my NPCs and the sort of techniques that I do that I like, that I think are helpful. In case you're the type of person who sometimes maybe doesn't feel comfortable doing voices or doesn't know how to do them well, and is maybe looking for, to see how someone else does it. I think there are a lot of people out there who don't feel comfortable doing voices. They might think it makes them look silly, or they just don't think they're good at them. They don't know how to do a bunch of them in a way that, will come off well. The most important thing that I think I can really say is that voices are not required. Certainly not. You don't have to do this whole, everyone has like flawless accents and every character sounds different. I think a lot of DMs, myself included, tend to have this is my guard voice, this is my peasant voice, or however you're going to do it, with not a lot of distinction between them. And I think that's fine. What's really important is just that your players know, what's going on, what's being said. It just occurred to me that maybe having my tablet so high would probably be bad, because you're probably getting all sorts of lighting effects going on. So we'll see how that goes. But to make an argument for why I like NPC voices and why I encourage people to maybe try to use NPC voices in their games is partially for immersion. It's cool for the players when your DM is using a distinct voice for different characters. It really helps get you into the game and helps you feel like you're really in the world when everyone sounds a little different. But also for the way you can tell a story through voices. And the best example I can give for that actually comes from Critical Role. And I'm going to try not to spoil anything here for anyone who hasn't finished Campaign 1. But there was a part near the end where the players were talking about some stuff with some other NPCs. They were formulating a plan about what to do. And while they were planning, what they were going to do next and what they were going to do to try to stop the bad guy, Matt chimes in with a very simple but ominous, "Oh, but I do." I'm not Matt Mercer. But that was a very distinct voice, and sort of speech pattern that he had used for this character that they had interacted with previously. And so by having this unique voice, he was able to just chime in using that voice to make it clear, hey, this character's in the room, and it was unique enough. Matt didn't have to be like, and then so-and-so chimes in and says, which is perfectly fine way to DM and tell a story, but it's got so much of an extra oomph when you actually have your players able to just respond to things in that sort of natural way. You don't need to be Matt Mercer or any other voice actor to do this sort of thing. I know I use him as an example. That was more for the fact that that example is readily available if you have seen that episode of Critical Role and you want to, kind of go see what I'm talking about. But you don't have to be Matt Mercer to do this sort of thing. You don't have to be a well-known voice actor with a broad range of voices and accents that you can, pull out at a moment's notice to be able to do this sort of thing. And that's part of my point with this video, is to show how I'm able to do it. And I think in a way that my players really enjoy it. So my first methodology, which I like to employ a lot, is to look at actors and other very famous people taking a famous person's speech patterns and the way that they talk, especially if they have a very unique way of speaking, can be a really good and simple way to create an NPC voice without having to do a lot of complicated work. In my game, I have a big bad evil guy who was an ancient Eldrin Lich that has awakened from his disappearance in the world. And when I'm speaking as him, I attempt to channel the late Christopher Lee and his very deep, slow, sort of regal speech pattern. And here's the thing about that. And this is why I like this trick and why I try to employ it. You might have watched that and gone, well, that barely sounds like Christopher Lee at all. Yes, but it's different from me. My narration voice, which would basically just be what I'm doing right now, how I talk normally, is different from what I just did. And the fact that there's that difference is all that matters. It doesn't matter that my impersonation isn't perfect. What matters is that it's different from how I normally talk. And so just by thinking about that character or thinking about that person, you can make the NPC sound different. And you can go very extreme with it. You could have a character that sounds like Gilbert Godfrey! Is that a good Gilbert Godfrey impression? Probably not, but it doesn't matter because it's still different. It's still something new than the way you normally talk.
I am a great magician. Your clothes are red!
Okay, so all joking aside, I actually found out something very important, and that's the fact that my camera can apparently only record in 20-minute increments. And when it stops recording, there's no indication that it stopped recording. So when you continue to ramble on and on for a good period of time, and then finally notice that the camera has turned off due to inactivity, and then go over and check and see that, oh, you filled up a 20-minute slot, and certainly you weren't talking for more than 20 minutes. So the long and short of it is I lost a majority of what I was talking about, and now this is a new day, and I have to fix everything that I had been saying and start over from where I was lost. So, to pick up from where I was, I gave the example of using Christopher Lee's voice for my big bad evil lich character, with that sort of slow, methodical, very regal tone of speaking. And you can do things with more extreme fictional characters. For example, there is, if you're familiar with the Halo Wars game, in one cutscene, there's one elite that walks up to the Arbiter and, tells him that there's an infection and, things are proceeding in a certain direction. I can't remember exactly what he's saying, but there's one line he speaks, and he's got this very particular way of speaking when he says, "What if the infection defiles the relic?" Weird kind of raspy, high-pitched, odd sort of voice. But again, something that, even if I don't replicate it perfectly, that's a very interesting way to speak. You could certainly imagine some sort of interesting NPC, maybe a goblin, or even a kobold or something like that, which could talk like this. Having that one line that I know that character has said as a sort of frame of reference makes it easier for myself. Because once I say that line, "What if the infection defiles the relic?" then I can say all sorts of things, because now I have a baseline to base it off of. You could do a character like, hey, everyone's pissed about the Super Bowl halftime show. You could do a character like Squidward. Does this sound like Squidward? Maybe. Probably not. But it's different. Kind of an interesting character voice. I don't know who this could be. Maybe a nasally annoying noble that your party has to deal with? Could work. And arguably, one of the best things about using this methodology is that it's probably not going to sound like that character. But that means that your players won't necessarily be able to say, oh, he's just doing a Gollum impression, for this goblin that we're talking to. He's literally just doing Gollum. It's not going to sound like Gollum because you probably can't do a perfect Gollum impression, and that's better for that reason. The other thing I try to do is not worry about doing an accent poorly. So, I might not be able to do a very good Australian accent, and I'm very sorry to all the Aussies out there who have probably decided they will never back me now. But the point being, this might be a very bad Australian accent, but it could be a very good accent for the culture or the region of the world, my world. They speak like this. This is how they talk. It's not Australian. It's not Australia. It's something else. And my attempts to mimic an Australian accent could be a perfect interpretation of that fantasy culture's actual accent. I also like to use catchphrases, or even not necessarily catchphrases, but sort of, talking about speech patterns, sort of I don't want to use the word a tick necessarily, but something that, is unique to that character. You might think of characters like Mr. Mackey from South Park, okay? Or Naruto. I don't want to say it. But you know what I'm talking about. Naruto, he has his catchphrase he puts at the end of his sentences. That in itself requires you to do no sort of special voice. But because it's a unique way of speaking, it helps ground that character and establishes for your players, hey, this is this character speaking. I don't have to tell you. I have one character in my games. His name is Pizzashra. He's a lizard folk. He's a very weird lizard folk. He seems to be very good at emoting and having emotions and all those sorts of things. But he's a lizard folk. And the way that I do his voice when I'm speaking as him is, first of all, I borrow this sort of interesting lizard-like voice, which I believe Matt Colville had done in one of his videos. He does this for his Dragonborn. Now, my Dragonborn, by the way, they have much deeper, very elite from Halo voices. But my lizard folk have this sort of, lizard-like, reptilian voice. I don't know where it comes from, but somehow, maybe you listening to it, you might be thinking, yeah, that sounds like a lizard guy, like that sounds like a lizard person. So I take that, but I also add in this sort of sucking in sound that I do with my mouth. That thing right there. And I can feel my sort of my cheek flaps. I don't know what you'd call this. I can feel those sort of vibrating because of how fast I suck in. But I do that a lot while I'm speaking as him. The other thing I do is that I always speak in the third person as Pizzashra. Pizzashra won't say, I made this for you. Pizzashra would say, Pizzashra made this for you. Combine all those things together, and you end up with a character that sounds like this. Oh, Pizzashra would enjoy helping. Yes, Pizzashra would like to help. Different, unique. I don't have to say, Pizzashra speaks up. When I lapse into that voice, my players know who I'm talking. My players know who's talking. And that helps with the immersion. Of course, my girlfriend hates that voice. She hates when I use it in any situation that's not D&D. But when we're playing D&D, I think she would agree, it doesn't bother her. Because at that point, she's lapsed into her character. She's fit into that role. She knows that that voice is not me, it's that character. And that's what you're looking for. So that's how I do NPC voices. I try to consider characters or actors or other famous people that have an interesting way of speaking, and I try to emulate that speech. Even if it comes out poorly, it's different from how I normally talk, and therefore it works as an NPC voice. I try to do accents, and I'm not afraid of doing them, even if they're bad. I acknowledge for myself, and this is something I do for myself to help myself, I acknowledge that this might be a bad Irish accent, or it might be a bad German accent, or whatever it is I'm trying to do. But for my world, it's a perfect accent for the culture I'm trying to describe, or the culture that this person is from. And finally, I try to insert things like catchphrases, odd sounds, or quirks in speech that is a way that I wouldn't normally speak, but helps define that character very well. So hopefully, I don't know if this has helped anyone. Maybe it was just entertaining and weird for you to watch me making weird, stupid voices. Either way, I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, or if you, somewhere down there should be a link to my Patreon. You can back me there if you'd like to help me out with, being able to afford better equipment, maybe a camera that doesn't only record in 20-minute increments. Either way, I hope you had fun, and I hope you have a good evening. I need to think of a catchphrase. I need a catchphrase. So thinking of rolling dice, maybe? May all your hits be crits? That's stupid. Well, either way, thanks for watching.